Hi, I'm Valerie Engelhart, and in this video I am going to be painting a quilt block on a piece of watercolor paper using the purple color of the Kuretake graphite colors. So the purpose of creating this painting is I want to make a cheater quilt essentially by painting a quilt block and uploading it to the internet so I can print it off on like fabric and wallpaper. So the first thing I'm going to do is use my ruler and draw out my quilt block. All right, I've got all my lines in, and there are a couple places where I didn't line things up completely perfectly, which some people who quilt, that would drive them nuts. But when I sew, my seams are usually a little wonky, so I'm not going to be too precise when I paint this. If you want this to be perfectly angular, you can put down tape or even some masking fluid, but honestly, I think masking fluid would still come out kind of wonky. So you could tape things down to get perfect straight edges, but I'm okay with things being a little more, let's say, handmade look. So let's see, I'm gonna grab that purple and I'm just gonna go in. Oh, actually, I'm gonna pause. I wanted these lines to be dark enough that you can see, but I do actually want to use this piece later, so I'm going to grab my kneaded eraser and lighten up some of these lines before I start. Okay, now those lines are barely visible. My paintbrush already has paint loaded on it, and because I'm right-handed, I'm gonna move from left to right. And let's just get started. I'll start here. And I picked a flat brush because it will allow me to I'll have a better chance of having a straight edge than if I'm using a round brush. But you can use whatever brush you have, whatever one you want. I'm using a size 6 flat. That looks to be about 3/8 of an inch. And for this particular quilt block, it needs to just be 2 colors. So color number 1 is the white of the paper. There we go, half of it's already done. And the other part is this dark, moody graphite purple. Now the other side. Ooh, that's really dark. So I'm gonna grab some water and just drag that pigment out. And I'm okay if it's a little mottled, a little variated, because this is watercolor and I want this to have that hand look feel, because I'm very much doing this by hand. Oh, I love how moody this looks. More paint, and I'll come down here. I do have paint getting on my desk. That's okay, I'll just wipe it off later. Now, since the purpose of this piece is to create a pattern, if I do make a mistake and get a little bit of paint or smudge into a white area, the bonus is I'm going to be putting this into the computer later anyway, so I can fix things digitally. But the less I have to fix, the better. Brush is a bit dry, and I am completely fine with getting blooms and cauliflowers. This is not meant to be a piece of high art. I was about to start on this corner, and then remembering, oh yeah, Val, right-handed, if you want to go back and work over here, that's going to be a bit of a pain, so let's just go in right with these blocks. And these ones are just square. I do want the little triangles to touch the squares at the corners, because if I were quilting, that is what I would be aiming for. But also if I were quilting, I would have plenty of marks and corners that don't line up. I'd have plenty of wobbly edges. So perfectionism is not that important for me. Now, because my paper is not taped down, it is starting to buckle. And I'm just gonna roll with it. I didn't want to tape down my work because then I'd have edges that I couldn't account for measurement-wise. Because when I tape things down, I don't do a good job of measuring. I'll just mess this up a little bit. It's getting a little darker than I want. So I am painting this as part of a Spoonflower challenge. It's like modern minimalist quilts, and you are only allowed to use 2 colors, which is why I picked these 2. Lots of good contrast. And one of my better selling designs is a just black and white flying geese quilt block design, which is just a bunch of triangles, but they kind of like rotate around the square. And I guess kind of gives like a V formation, which is probably where flying geese came from, like why it's named the flying geese block. But don't quote me on that because I don't actually know. I'm just guessing. If you're having trouble with your brush not distributing pigment as well as you would like, it's probably just a water control issue, and it just means add more water to your brush. The flat brushes that I use are synthetic, so they don't really hold a lot of water, but they hold plenty enough for my purpose. And since my paper is not taped down, I can start rotating it if I need to. I was avoiding it before so I didn't put myself in a situation where I would rest my hand on the paper, which is a bit of a bad habit of mine. Because what happens then is you get the pigment on your hand, and then when you lie it down somewhere else, it starts smudging your paper and it smudges the paint that's already down. And so, if at all possible, don't rest your hand on your paper. Said from someone who often rests her hand on the paper. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but there are these little dots right here where I accidentally flicked some paint. Now, the good news is that segment is actually supposed to be painted in anyway, so that's not a big deal. But if that was a white segment, I would recommend leave it alone, let it dry, because I can easily get rid of dots in Photoshop. It's a lot, well, not a lot harder, but a little harder and more time consuming to get rid of smears if I tried lifting it using water. Ooh, now see, that's a mistake right there, and one that I can go fix in Photoshop later, or I could just leave it. We'll see. I'll probably fix it. Just with a little tool. In this case, I'd probably use the clone stamp tool and then just clone some of the white paper around it. But for healing like these dots, I would go for the like auto healer. So I find it does a good job. Oh, see, some of my strokes were dry, so I'm just going to add some water. Plus, this pigment is pretty concentrated along this line, and I just want to move it around. Oh, misty and moody, just the way I like it. Now, another question that might arise is, if I'm doing this just solely for the purpose of making a pattern design, why am I doing this? Why am I not just painting digitally? And it's twofold. One is I find it very therapeutic to just play with watercolor and paint, and I just want to, but I have found that my personally best selling designs are the ones with hand-painted watercolor. All right, just these little triangles left to go, and then this quilt block is done. And of course, any of these graphite lines, the pencil lines, I can later remove in Photoshop, because I erased them pretty well so that they're very light, but the scanner will still pick them up, and I can leave them, but like I can see them right here, and so it's a really easy thing to remove, so I'll do that. All right, there we are. The quilt block is painted. Now, I could pull out a hairdryer and blast this to get it to dry right away, but I like how when the paint slowly dries, you're more likely to get some of these interesting texture effects. So I'm just going to go grab a cup of coffee, maybe go scroll the internet for a little bit while this dries, and I want it to dry completely before I put it in my scanner. Now, if you want, you could just use your phone, My phone right now is being taken up with this video, but you could take a picture and upload the file that way. I have trouble with a couple things. One, the exterior lighting will typically make my white more yellow, and getting a photo straight on can be pretty difficult, at least for me. There's always a slight angle, and when I put this into my software, I want this to be as much of a square with nice straight edges as I could get it to be. So I'm just gonna go chill for a bit, and then I'll come back and scan it. Okay, now I am in Photoshop. After I pressed stop recording, I did notice that I forgot to paint in a little bit of my block, so don't worry if you did see that. I did realize immediately and went in and filled it in. So the paint was even still wet and it blended pretty seamlessly. Now that it's scanned, I can see my pencil lines, so I'm going to zoom in on some of those. And I could leave it, but I don't want to. So I'm going to go over to the Spot Healing Brush Tool, or J, and I'm just going to do this. And I'm going to do this for all of the lines. Just use the clone stamp tool. I have it selected, I'm pressing Option on my Mac, and I'm picking some of the white space. And the reason I did that, I'll go back to my healing brush. If I do this, oh look, it made a divot. So undo, go back to my clone stamp, Option, and correct. And I've made it to the part of my painting where I made that little mistake of a divot, and it's a little distracting. I do want to fix that. So I am going to go to my clone stamp tool, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to clone this area and fill it in here. So I'm going to make my brush a little bigger, press Option here, line it up, and bring it down. Next, I'm going to go to my, oh no, I'm still on my clone stamp tool, but I'm going to stamp over here in the white and get rid of this. Now we do see that it didn't seamlessly merge. So I'm going to go to my Spot Healing tool and do that. And look, now that distracting divot is fixed. Hey, I've got everything cleaned up that I want. I've removed any pencil lines and got rid of any little bumps or divots I didn't like, but for the most part, I kept everything as it was. Now, I could have just scanned this in and uploaded it immediately onto sites like Spoonflower, and because it was a square, it could have been its own block, but I really do like to take these steps to clean things up, make them a little nicer, and make sure everything is, pun intended, squared away before I start trying to list things for sale. Now, one other thing that we can do is sometimes when you scan something, it doesn't look quite the way it does in real life, or maybe it does, but you want to change it a bit. So one thing, I'm working on a Mac. I assume on a Windows, instead of when I say Command, you hit Control, but I'm on a Mac, so Command L for my levels. I can make my whites a little brighter, and I can make the midtones a little richer. And that looks nice, especially because this is a modern challenge. I like that contrast, so I didn't even move it over very much, just a few hundredths of whatever that measurement is. And okay. And then, let's see, I could probably even change the color up a bit by using Command U. And here's the hue slider. See, I can make it more purple or lean it more green. It was at 0. If I lean it this way, it's getting a little more purple. And I feel like in the scanning, I lost some of the purple I have in real life. I'm actually looking over at the quilt block right now, and I would encourage you, especially if you're scanning in fine art and editing it for shows, have the real thing next to you and turn your brightness up all the way. So I'm seeing that It's almost there. Actually, my real piece is even more purple, so I'm going to increase it that way. That's looking pretty close. What if I change the saturation? Does that... Oh, actually, yeah, that's getting it's a little too much. But there we go. That actually looks much more similar to the real life block that I made. And I'm going to press OK to set the transformation. And one quick way we can test and see how this looks as a pattern is to go up to view. Oh, I think I accidentally cut that off of my screen, but just go up to view and click pattern preview. And I'm going to scroll out. And of course, we'll see these lines here. They don't match up. And on certain patterns, that would be not a good thing and could even be a nightmare. However, I could go in and try to fix it, or I leave it, because if I were quilting, this is what my quilt would look like. I might go in and darken up this little line area, but after that I'm okay with the shifting, because if I bought, and you can buy like just watercolor look fabric and cut it up into blocks and stitched it together, it would likely look like this. It would very likely not line up perfectly, be a little wonky, and I'm okay with that. So there we are. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something. If you liked seeing this kind of tutorial, press that like button and leave a comment to let me know if there's anything that you want to see me do in the future. And if you want to see more videos, press the subscribe button, because I post every Monday and Thursday. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye!